I couldn't feel my legs anymore. The cold had crept up past my thighs, wrapping around my body like iron chains. My arms flailed through the thick, black water, each movement heavier than the last, my breath turning ragged as panic took over. Somewhere above me, sunlight filtered weakly through the canopy of trees, but down here in the murky swamp, it was just me sinking. And then I saw him, Eric, standing at the edge of the marsh, just a few feet from solid ground. He watched me with a strange calm. Not fear, not love, not even worry, just quiet satisfaction. Eric, I gasped, please, please help me. He didn't move. He crouched down slowly, resting his arms on his knees, and tilted his head like I was some animal caught in a trap. I've been waiting for this moment for 12 years, he said softly, almost lovingly. It's poetic, really. I stared at him, too stunned to speak. This is what freedom looks like, he continued. You've always been so strong, so driven, so untouchable. And now look at you, helpless, drowning in the very thing you thought you could control. Tears blurred my vision, mixing with the stinging sweat on my cheeks. I tried to scream, but my voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. You're not serious. Eric, please, I'm your wife. He smiled, a small, almost regretful smile. Not anymore. My body slipped lower, the mud sucking at my hips, cold seeping into my bones. I reached for a branch, but it broke in my hand. The surface was too slick, the water too thick. I was going under, and he was just standing there, letting it happen. You'll be declared missing, he murmured, more to himself than to me. They'll search, of course, for a while, but no one will think twice. You needed a break, you were stressed, overworked, and then gone. The perfect tragedy. I screamed again. Not words, just raw, primal desperation. A sound I never knew I was capable of making. And still he didn't flinch. He just stood up. I'll circle back in 2 hours, he said coldly. If you're still floating, I'll drag you back in. But I doubt you'll last that long. By the time they find you, if they do, you'll already be a memory. He walked back into the trees, humming something light and cheerful, like he was strolling through a park. I was alone. The water was up to my chest now, and my muscles were trembling from the cold. I wasn't ready to die. Not like this. Not here. Not by his hand. I'll survive, I whispered through clenched teeth. And you'll regret this. But the words barely made it past my lips before the swamp swallowed them whole. 48 hours earlier. 2 days before I nearly drowned in that swamp, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and warm sunlight brushing against my face. For the first time in months, I had actually slept in. No alarms, no early calls from clients, no frantic to-do list playing in my head. Just soft sheets, silence, and that unmistakable scent of Colombian roast drifting in from the kitchen. Breakfast is ready, Eric called gently from down the hall. I made the omelet the way you like it. Extra spinach, no mushrooms. I smiled. He always remembered the smallest things. As I stretched beneath the covers, a wave of peace washed over me. The kind of peace that only comes after a hard-won victory. My company had just closed the biggest contract of our decade-long existence. We were now the exclusive cleaning provider for 3 major corporate buildings in downtown Charlotte. That single contract would triple our revenue in the next year. It still felt surreal. Just 10 years ago, Whitaker Commercial Cleaning was a side hustle I ran out of my studio apartment between night classes and weekend shifts. And now we were a regional powerhouse. Offices, warehouses, luxury condos, you name it, we handled it. And through it all, Eric had been there. Supportive, steady, never demanding more than I could give. That morning, as I sat at our marble-top kitchen island with a steaming cup of coffee in hand, I looked at my husband like I hadn't in a long time. His hair was still slightly tousled, glasses fogged from the steam of the pan, and he was humming a tune under his breath while plating our food. How did I get so lucky? I asked aloud, half to myself. He turned with a smirk. By being too stubborn to give up on me when I wore socks with sandals in college. I laughed. I knew you had potential even then. It wasn't just a joke. When we first got married, things were hard. Money was tight, our apartment was tiny, and the only thing we really had was love and a shared dream. I'd been pregnant when we walked down the aisle. Not planned, not easy. And then, barely a month after the wedding, a drunk driver changed everything. I lost the baby, and with it, the doctors told me I might never be able to have children again. It nearly broke me, but Eric never let go. He sat by my hospital bed, holding my hand through the worst of it. While I fell into silence, guilt, and grief, he built a shell around both of us and stood guard. In the years that followed, we stopped talking about children. We never really talked about the accident again, either. It just became this quiet space between us. Painful, but sacred. Instead, I poured myself into work. And Eric, sweet Eric, never complained. He picked up the slack at home, cooked dinner, folded laundry, ran errands, and sometimes even answered my business emails when I forgot. He called himself the house husband of the year. I called him my anchor. He taught part-time at the university, mostly literature and critical theory, but he was happy staying in the background. At least, that's what I thought. I never once heard him complain about my long hours or the late-night strategy meetings. We were a team, or so I believed. That morning, sitting across from him, everything still looked perfect. Our condo in uptown Charlotte was sleek and spacious, filled with warm wood and soft, neutral tones. Floor-to-ceiling windows caught the morning light just right. We had art on the walls, books lining the shelves, and a life that, on paper, should have been enough for anyone. But somewhere between sips of coffee and small talk, I noticed something. He wasn't looking at me. Not really. His eyes were fixed just to the left of mine, like he was listening but not absorbing anything I said. And when I reached out to brush a crumb from his chin, he flinched, just a little, but enough for me to notice. "Are you okay?" I asked. He blinked. "Yeah, just tired." "You haven't been sleeping much lately." "Neither have you," he replied, then quickly added. "But it's normal, right? Big milestones, big stress." "Right," I said softly, but something inside me tugged. Something didn't feel right. Still, I brushed it off. We'd been through worse. Maybe we just needed a break from the noise. Time to reconnect. I had no idea how much noise was really hiding beneath our silence. That afternoon, I canceled 2 meetings and told Sophie to hold all calls. I wanted to spend the day with Eric. Just the two of us, no distractions, no business. It was something we hadn't done in a while, and honestly, I missed him. We took a walk along the Greenway Trail by the river, where the cherry blossoms had just begun to bloom. Couples passed us, holding hands, laughing. Kids zipped by on scooters, dogs chased tennis balls. It was peaceful, normal, but we didn't talk much. He was quiet, too quiet, and I kept filling the silence with small talk about work, new clients, how proud I was of the team, how we could maybe start looking into expanding into other cities. Every now and then he'd nod or hum in agreement, but his eyes, they weren't with me. Later, we sat on a bench overlooking the water, and I took a breath before asking the question that had been crawling under my skin for days. "Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" He glanced at me. "What do you mean?" "Us. The baby. Everything." He was quiet for a long time. I watched a bird skim the surface of the water, circling for something it never caught. "I don't know," he said finally. "Sometimes. I guess." I didn't expect that answer. I don't even know what I had expected. A lie, maybe? A soft denial? He added, "But we made the best of it. Didn't we?" "Yeah," I whispered. "We did." I looked at him again, really looked, and for the first time in years, I saw a stranger sitting next to me. Same face, same voice, but something was missing. Or maybe something new had taken its place. There were little things I had overlooked. How he started locking his phone when he never used to. How he changed his passwords, security reasons, he said. How he suddenly had meetings at odd hours, or said he was at the university when I knew there were no evening classes that day. And then there were the receipts I found crumpled in his coat pocket. Fancy restaurants we'd never been to together, rideshare drop-offs that didn't match his usual route. I told myself it was probably something innocent, maybe a friend's birthday dinner. Maybe he just didn't tell me because he thought I was too busy. But I knew better. The truth has a smell, like something left too long in the dark. And once you notice it, it clings to everything. I started watching him more closely after that. Not in a paranoid way, at least not at first. Just observing, listening to the way he phrased things, the stories that didn't quite line up, the way he smiled less when I walked into a room. It wasn't just that we were drifting apart. It was that I didn't know who I was drifting away from anymore. One evening, I came home early and found him sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. He didn't hear me come in. "Eric," I said gently. He jumped, startled. "Oh, hey, you're home early. You okay?" "Yeah, just grading papers." There were no papers. I nodded and kissed his forehead like nothing was wrong. But in that moment, something inside me cracked. The kind of crack you don't hear, but you feel it. Deep, low, final. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt hollow. And that, more than anything, terrified me. Because I used to feel everything with him. Safety, comfort, trust. Now all I felt was distance. I used to believe that evil had a certain look to it, a glint in the eyes, a sharpness in the smile, a way of walking into a room like it already owned your soul. But Madison Clark didn't look like that. She looked like a kid, 19, barely legal, with oversized sweaters and glossy lips, the kind of girl who asked 100 innocent questions in a voice so soft you had to lean in just to hear it. The kind of girl who made you want to protect her. Or, in Eric's case, save her. I didn't know her name yet. Not then. But somewhere across town, while I was staring at the man I had loved for 12 years, wondering where he had gone, she was staring at the same man, planning how to keep him. Madison wasn't stupid. Not by a long shot. She didn't come to Charlotte for the scenery. She came for a man with money. That was the plan. She had an aunt here, barely. Someone who let her crash for a semester while she enrolled in a local college and began scouting. She wasn't even looking for someone young. In fact, she preferred older, established, the kind of man who'd confuse her helplessness for charm. And Eric Whitaker, with his tired eyes and empty marriage, was perfect. She met him on campus, played the struggling freshman card, slid into his office hours with questions she already knew the answers to. Told him how smart he was, how safe he felt, how kind. She never called him professor, only Eric. By the time she showed up in a sundress that didn't belong on a campus, he was already in too deep. And when she whispered, "I don't feel safe walking home alone," he didn't walk her home. He drove her. The first time they kissed, he apologized. She didn't. She giggled and said, "I was hoping you would." From that moment on, he was hers. He thought he was in control, that he was the one sneaking around, the one making choices. But Madison had a playbook. She kept it behind those baby blue eyes and sugar-sweet smiles. She was a chess player, and Eric was a pawn with a pension plan. I would later learn that within a few months, he'd rented her an apartment in a new high-rise downtown, just a few blocks from ours, bought her a car, paid for her spring break trip to Miami. She called him Pookie. He called her Mads. She told him she couldn't imagine being with anyone else, and then told her best friend that he was old but useful. And then she pulled her trump card. One night, while I was up late reviewing contracts, she texted Eric a picture of a positive pregnancy test and wrote, "I think we need to talk." He drove over immediately. They didn't talk. He cried. She comforted him. She told him she was scared too, that she didn't want to break up his marriage, but the baby, well, he had a choice to make. Be the man she believed he could be, or go back to being someone's shadow. He believed her. Of course he did, because she knew exactly what to say. Because men like Eric don't cheat because they want someone else. They cheat because they want to be someone else. Someone new, someone needed, someone chosen. And Madison made him feel like he mattered more than he ever had with me. A week later, he bought her a second-hand crib and started Googling names. She suggested Annabelle, said it was sweet and classic. He didn't even flinch. Meanwhile, at home, he held my hand like everything was fine. Told me we should take a trip. Just the two of us. Said he missed me, and maybe part of him did. But another part was already gone. The part that bought prenatal vitamins and made secret doctor appointments, all for a child that didn't exist. Because Madison wasn't pregnant. She never was. That second pink line, bought online. $10 for a pack of fake tests designed to trap men like Eric. She didn't want a baby. She wanted an empire. And Eric, well, Eric was too blinded by fantasy to see the rope tightening around his neck. It started like a gift. "I think you need a break," Eric said one evening, his voice gentle as he rubbed my shoulders. "You've been going nonstop. Let's get away for a few days. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere with no phones." I remember leaning back into him, eyes closed, grateful. God, yes. That actually sounds perfect. I thought it was love. I thought he missed me. That night, I asked Sophie to look into options. Just a short trip, somewhere close. Maybe the mountains. A spa if possible. Nothing fancy, just a reset. "Are you sure you want me to handle this personally?" she asked, hesitant. "Yes," I said. "Eric and I need this. But I don't have time to plan. Just make it peaceful. Remote. Disconnected." She nodded. "I'll find something." Sophie had always been thorough. In 6 months as my assistant, she'd proven herself sharp, unshakable, and fiercely loyal. She was the kind of woman I would have trusted with my passwords, my calendar, my company. And now my life. She found the place 2 days later, a secluded mountain resort in the Blue Ridge. Private cabins, natural hot springs, guided hikes through national forest. No cell towers nearby. No Wi-Fi in the rooms. Just nature. Exactly what Eric wanted. I didn't know that he'd already seen the brochure, that he'd picked it weeks before and quietly dropped hints until Sophie found it on her own. I didn't know he'd been feeding her phrases to use. Perfect for disconnecting, very exclusive, far from town. And I definitely didn't know he'd already requested the exact cabin, number 16, the one closest to the marshland trail. The brochure didn't mention the marsh, just a scenic overlook, a thermal pool, a winding path that dipped behind the property, a quiet, unlit stretch of forest. But he knew. Of course he knew. He'd grown up in Asheville, spent summers hiking those mountains. He'd once told me he could get lost in those woods for days and never need a map. I thought it was charming. Now, I wonder how long he'd been planning to use that knowledge for something else. Sophie booked everything, confirmed the dates, even arranged for the company to run on autopilot while I was away. She smiled as she handed me the itinerary. "Everything's taken care of," she said, and I believed her. She had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. Eric had been careful, subtle, always playing the part of the doting husband. Even she had fallen for it. Looking back, I don't blame her. He fooled me too. The night before we left, Eric was unusually affectionate. He made dinner, my favorite, shrimp risotto with lemon zest. He poured wine, lit candles, put on a playlist we hadn't touched since our 5th anniversary. It felt like time travel. For a moment, I let myself believe this was real, that we were healing, that this trip could be the beginning of something new. He kissed me softly that night, held me longer than usual, whispered, "You're everything to me." And I believed him. God help me, I believed him. I didn't know I was packing for my own disappearance. I didn't know the man I was kissing goodbye in our hallway mirror was already imagining a world where I didn't exist. He carried my bags to the car the next morning, and I smiled at him the entire ride there, thinking this is going to save us. The first hour of the drive we talked. Nothing deep, just road trip chatter, the weather, the trees changing color, a playlist we both pretended to enjoy. By the second hour, the silence grew. I looked out the window while he drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. There was something in the way he kept checking the GPS, even though I knew he'd been to the mountains a dozen times. He didn't need directions. He needed control. When we arrived at the resort, I was struck by how beautiful it was. Tucked into the hillside, with pine trees hugging every side and mist curling off the rooftops, it looked like a dream. Our cabin had a stone fireplace, wide wooden beams, and a view of the forest so dense it swallowed the sun before dusk. It was quiet, too quiet. There was no cell signal, no Wi-Fi, just us, and the hush between us that felt heavier than the air outside. "I told you it would be perfect," Eric said, setting our bags down. "No distractions. Just us." "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just us." The first night he was kind, attentive even. He made cocoa from scratch, played cards by the fire, read me a passage from his book. But it all felt rehearsed, like he was trying to convince both of us that this was still what it used to be. I went to bed early, hoping the morning would feel different. It didn't. The next day, he planned everything. "We've got a nature hike at 10, thermal spring therapy at noon, massage appointments at 3, and dinner with the host at 7, he rattled off, handing me a schedule like it was a corporate retreat. "Can we just rest?" I asked. He hesitated. "I thought you'd want to make the most of it." I nodded, but my chest tightened. There was no room to breathe. No room to be alone with him without filling the air with structured noise. He was avoiding something, avoiding me. I tried to brush it off. We hiked. We soaked in mineral water. We smiled for strangers. He even kissed me on the forehead in front of the couple in the next cabin, like we were still newlyweds. But that night, as I stepped out onto the deck in my robe, the stars overhead felt colder than I remembered. I turned to look at him through the glass door. He was staring at me, but not with love, with calculation, like he was measuring something. The next morning, I woke up before him. I needed air, space, still in my thermal leggings and fleece jacket. I slipped on my boots, scribbled a note, just taking a short walk, and stepped into the woods behind the cabin. The trail was quiet, a soft crunch beneath my feet. The smell of pine was thick, grounding, familiar. I didn't take my phone. What was the point? It wouldn't work here anyway. I just wanted 20 minutes alone. I didn't realize how far I'd gone until I heard the ground change beneath me. It squelched, wet, spongy. I paused, confused. The trail had vanished, replaced by patches of moss and mud. When I turned back, I realized I couldn't see the cabin anymore, just trees. My pulse quickened. I wasn't lost, not yet, but I was definitely off course. And then I saw him, Eric. He stepped out from behind a tree, like he'd been following me. "Hey," I said, startled. "What are you doing out here?" He smiled. "I figured you'd get curious. This place, it's peaceful, isn't it?" Something in his tone made the hair on my neck rise. He stepped closer. "Come on," he said, nodding deeper into the woods. "There's a little overlook down this way. I used to come here as a kid." "I think I've gone far enough," I said, forcing a laugh. "You sure?" he asked. "It's not every day we get to be completely alone." And the way he said alone, it wasn't tender. It wasn't loving. It was final. A breeze rustled the trees behind us, and for a second, I heard nothing but the sound of water lapping somewhere ahead. Not a stream. Something wider. Still. Something like a swamp. I took a step back. Eric tilted his head, watching me. "Don't you trust me?" I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out, because for the first time in 12 years, I knew the truth. No, I didn't trust him. Not anymore. By the time I realized how far I'd wandered, it was too late. The ground had shifted beneath me, softening with each step until my boot sank halfway into the muck. I tried to pull back, but the mud held fast, like it had been waiting for me all along. I slipped, one leg in, then the other. Cold water climbed past my calves, then my knees, then my thighs. The more I struggled, the deeper I sank. My breathing turned frantic, my hands clawing at roots, branches, anything. I screamed his name. Eric! No answer. He was there, I knew he was there. Somewhere just beyond the trees. Watching. Waiting. I screamed again. Nothing. And then I stopped screaming. Because I knew. He wasn't coming. I was alone. The swamp was still. Birds had gone silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. My legs had gone numb. My fingers shook violently, unable to grip the slick roots anymore. I felt my body slipping into stillness. I won't die like this, I whispered. I won't let him win. But the words tasted like lies. And then, just as I closed my eyes, there was a sound. Footsteps. Soft at first, then faster, urgent. A figure crashed through the brush, tall and broad-shouldered, eyes wild with alarm. Hold on, the man shouted. Don't move. I've got you. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even nod. But I saw him, really saw him, as he stretched out across the mud, belly down, holding a long wooden branch toward me. Take it, he said. Grab on. My fingers wrapped around the branch with the last of my strength. Inch by inch, he pulled me forward, never letting go, murmuring steady words I couldn't understand, but somehow trusted. When I finally reached the edge, he didn't hesitate. He scooped me into his arms, mud and all, and carried me like I weighed nothing. That was the last thing I remembered. I woke up to the scent of eucalyptus and antiseptic. A soft beeping echoed in the background, and my body ached in places I didn't know existed. My lips were cracked, my arms bandaged. I was lying in a bed, not a cabin bed, but a medical one, a private clinic by the look of it. Warm light, pastel walls. Somewhere safe. And sitting beside me in a weathered leather chair was the man from the woods. He looked up from a book, startled. You're awake, he said, standing slowly. God, you scared the hell out of me. Who are you? I croaked. Logan, he said. Logan Pierce. I run the resort. I was out checking the trails when I saw you go off the path. I blinked at him, confused. You saw me? He hesitated, then nodded. I saw everything. I felt the blood drain from my face. The man who left you, he added quietly. Your husband. I couldn't speak. My body began to tremble. I waited until he left, Logan continued. I wasn't sure what he was doing at first. But then I saw you and I knew. He looked away, jaw tight. You would have died, he said. He would have let you. I stared at the ceiling, unable to process it all. My chest rose and fell with shallow, panicked breaths. There's more, he said gently, reaching for a folder on the nightstand. The doctor thought I should be the one to tell you. I turned my head slowly. You're pregnant, Logan said. The world stopped moving. Pregnant. The word echoed in my chest like thunder rolling over quiet hills. I wanted to cry, to scream, to laugh, but I could do none of it. I just stared at Logan, blinking in disbelief. You're sure? I whispered. He nodded slowly. The doctor confirmed it this morning. Early stage, maybe 5 weeks. 5 weeks. That meant before the cabin, before the swamp, when things still felt like they could be fixed. I turned away, not from Logan, from the weight of everything that had happened, from the pieces of my old life that had shattered beneath the water. Eric didn't know, and I wouldn't tell him. Not yet. Logan kept his promise. He said nothing to the staff, paid my medical bill in full, told them I'd fallen on a trail and he'd rescued me, nothing more. When the police questioned him about a missing woman whose husband had filed a report, he answered calmly. She left early that morning, he told them. Said she needed space. I assumed she'd gone home. They didn't push. There was no security footage, no cabin neighbors, and no one cared enough to look twice at the man reporting her missing. Eric played his part, I'm sure. Shocked, distraught, maybe even weeping over my disappearance. But by the time he filed the report, I was already gone. Logan helped me disappear. We left that night, 2 hours after the last ranger clocked out. I rode in the back seat of his Jeep, wrapped in a wool blanket, head pressed to the glass as we drove away from the mountains and toward something I didn't yet understand. He took me to a safe house on the outskirts of Charlotte, one of the older properties owned by his family, barely furnished, forgotten. It was perfect, quiet, untouched. No one knew it existed. There, I began to heal. It took time. My body was weak, bruised, still bearing the cold from the swamp. But the baby was strong. At night, I would lie on the couch with a hand on my belly and whisper, "You're safe now." I said it more for me than for the child. Logan checked in every day. He never pushed, never asked about Eric, never treated me like a victim. He just brought food, books, vitamins, sometimes flowers from his greenhouse, sometimes silence. The silence was what I needed most. 2 weeks passed before I asked him to bring my laptop. "I have work to do," I said. He didn't ask questions, just nodded. I logged into my old accounts, changed passwords, reviewed every contract I'd ever signed, every trust, every document Eric had ever skimmed and assumed I wasn't smart enough to protect. He was wrong. My company was mine, legally, structurally, financially. I'd built it from scratch before he ever touched a dollar of it. And when we got married, I'd followed my father's advice. Trust is earned, but paperwork is permanent. So I kept everything separate, which meant when Eric tried to move on, he would learn something horrifying. He had nothing. The joint accounts? I drained them the night I arrived at the safe house. Every cent transferred to my trust. The house? Leased in my name. Purchased through my holding company. I terminated the lease. The car? Registered to the business. The credit cards? Cut. By the time Eric returned to Charlotte expecting a grieving widow's windfall, he found a cold, empty house with no electricity, no water, and no access to a single account. He called me. I didn't answer. He emailed. I deleted it. Then he showed up at the front gate of my company building, demanding to speak to me. Sophie met him in the lobby. Her face was steel. "She's not here," she said. "She won't ever be here again." "Where is she?" he snapped. "You don't get to erase a person." Sophie looked him in the eye and said, "She didn't erase you. You did that all on your own." Then she turned her back and walked away. I watched the security footage from my safe house, watched him unravel in a 3-piece suit he couldn't afford, surrounded by people who no longer answered to him. And for the first time in months, I smiled. I gave birth in early spring. It was raining the day she came. A soft, silver rain, not the kind that roars or threatens, but the kind that cleanses, that whispers of something new. Logan drove me to the hospital, white-knuckled the whole way, even though I kept telling him I was fine. "You say that," he muttered, "but you're breathing like you're about to break the steering wheel in half." I laughed, even through the contractions. We decided not to call anyone else. No press releases, no family, just him and me. A quiet birth for a quiet beginning. I named her Lily, not after anyone, just because it felt right. Simple, pure, untouched by everything that had come before her. When the nurse laid her in my arms, I stared at her face, her dark lashes, her tiny fists clenched like she was already fighting for her place in the world. "I promise," I whispered to her, "you'll never have to earn your safety." She opened her eyes, and just like that, the war inside me went still. I stayed in the safe house for 3 more months. No social media, no interviews, no public statements. I rebuilt my company from behind a firewall, reshaping departments, investing in people who never got their shot when Eric was around. I let Sophie run the day-to-day, and she did it better than I ever could. Logan came by often, at first with groceries, then books, then toys for Lily, then dinners he cooked himself, sometimes burned, sometimes perfect but always made with care. He never pushed. He never asked for more. But I saw it in the way he held Lily like she was the most fragile thing he'd ever touched. In the way he looked at me like I hadn't broken, but bent and returned stronger. One evening, as the sunset painted the windows gold, I asked him, "Do you ever regret saving me?" He turned from the stove, brow furrowed. "What kind of question is that?" "I mean, it would have been easier. If you hadn't been there, you wouldn't have had to lie, to cover for me, to carry all this." He stepped closer, wiping his hands on a towel. "If I hadn't been there," he said softly, "the world would have lost something it didn't even know it needed." I blinked. He looked down at Lily, asleep in my arms. "And I would have never met her," he added, brushing her tiny forehead with a reverent touch. "Or you." I didn't say anything. But that night, when he held me for the first time, it wasn't desperate. It wasn't passionate. It was quiet, real. Two people who had lost too much, now finally choosing each other, not because they had to, but because they could. A year later, I stood in front of a crowd at a women's leadership summit. I told them my story. Not the details, not the swamp or the betrayal or the man who tried to erase me, but the truth underneath it all. "I almost disappeared," I said, "not because I was weak, but because I trusted the wrong silence." They nodded. Some cried. And when I walked off stage, Logan was waiting with Lily in his arms. She clapped. He smiled. And I finally truly felt free. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's simply living. Living better. Living brighter. Living without fear. And never ever looking back.